And there we are. Good evening. Yes, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naja Faisal. I'm your host. I have been streaming recently on many different topics. So I have the Imperatives podcast, which is a podcast dedicated to improving someone's life in terms of health, wealth, and love. But I also have Singularity Syndicate, which is a podcast dedicated for demystifying transformative technologies shaping our future, and technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, all of these technologies that are quite important and quite transformative of our societies. And I believe that there is a need to raise awareness on these technologies. So this event today is kind of a mixture between the Singularity Syndicate event or podcast and the Imperatives podcast. And it is my pleasure to welcome a dear friend and a great special guest on the show, cybersecurity expert Danny Chung. Welcome, Danny.
Hey, John, great to be here. I'm glad that you bring out this platform, and it's a great use for a lot of different people.
Absolutely. So, Danny, to kickstart this cybersecurity essentials webinar, or I would say conversation, which is a very important conversation. I know many people have asked me and are anxiously waiting for this podcast because it is something that as more the more we get dependent on digital services and digital devices, the more the conversation about cybersecurity becomes more prominent. And in my immediate family and friends, I know at least three people who got scammed in the
Mm.
last 5 years. So I think me alone, I'd love to learn about cybersecurity, and I'm sure that a lot of people do. But before we kickstart this conversation, I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us, why did you get interested in cybersecurity?
Sure. First thing, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and we could jump into your first question there. So, my name is Danny Chung. I do hold an MBA, a dual MBA in cybersecurity and global supply chain management. Recently, I do have some GX certs that I accomplished or earned, including the GCIA, GCIH, and the GSEC. Prior to that, I did have a Security Plus as well. Currently, I'm studying for the CISSP, which is one of the higher tier certs. Everyone who is someone in information security has a CISSP for the most part. I do have a Medium that I do my blog posts and so on. I've been doing a lot of those. I've been very active on Reddit as well. If you like what I write about, you could visit my Medium at danny-chung.medium.com. I'm sure Naja could share that later on. I do have work published in peer review journals. I've done presentations in academic conferences as well. And I'm currently an adjunct at the University of Redlands. So I do enjoy doing that as well. And then I am also, the rest of my time, I'm doing a lot of learning. I'm also doing job hunting for a full time position in cybersecurity or information security in general. A little bit more on the history side of me. So I've been really involved in tech for maybe the past 10, 15 years or so in various capacities, right? I remember in high school, I took my phone apart, taking it taking different components, putting it back together. Same with my computer. I used to root my phone. I used to do many different things, tinkering around. So it's always been a nature of mine, just to be curious and try to be to find out and learn more, right? And very hands on sometimes too. And so with cyber in general, it's a very it's a field that is constantly evolving, right? It's constantly moving, it's constantly shifting, and you just really have to keep up with the times, right? Because if you want to continue learning, you have to do this growth mindset type of thing, right? Um, because it's changing so fast, it's very interesting because you could be in this particular field for 30, 40 years, and you'll still be learning something new every day, right? You never stop learning. That's great about this field, and I really gravitate towards that, right? On a daily basis, I find myself really excited to learn new things, learning new tools, finding new attacks and new vulnerabilities. So I really love that, and that sort of draws me towards this particular field. So I hope I do answer your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's important what you mentioned about that constantly evolving field, and probably the conversation me and you had, I think last maybe 2 3 months ago, when you also gave a kind of a webinar on a live webinar. If you remember, that conversation happened before artificial intelligence. So, and now I think we will have kind of course, the fundamentals are the same, but as technology continue to evolve, the cybersecurity side of things has to continuously evolve as well. So I think that's the importance of what you're saying, is that this field is in constant motion, where the more advanced technology we get, the more tools and the more threats we have. At the same time, the more tools we need on our side to protect ourselves, and therefore we have to continue evolving. So let's go back to the basics, okay? What is cybersecurity, and how do you define it first? And then we can go through, like, okay, what we can do to protect ourselves and to the foundations.
Sure. Going back to the basics, I love it. So in cybersecurity, everything is based, or I would say 99% or 100% is based on three foundational concepts, right? What we call the CIA triad, right? The confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? You have to have those three to be able to really, everything else you do is based on that. That's a foundation.
Say them again,
There's
please.
So CIA triad, this is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So confidentiality is more of, making sure that your secret stuff remains secret, right? You have
Mhm.
maybe your passwords or your bank account numbers or social security numbers, such as, things like that you don't want to be in the public. And we could talk a little bit about that a little later on, right? I think there's a video I could have you show to
Mhm.
why it's important for us to keep certain things secret.
So
Um,
confidentiality, integrity, and what's the last one?
Availability.
Availability.
Right.
And this is the cybersecurity triad, as you said.
Yeah, the triad. Yeah, and so we use stuff like encryption for confidentiality, right? We want to encrypt, so even if someone who is able to intercept our message, right? They can't make whatever of it, right? It's gobbledygook for them unless they have the key for decrypting that. It'll be useless information to them or useless data to them, right? So the next we have integrity, right? So this involves ensuring that the information we see is accurate, it's complete, and it's unaltered. It's not tampered with, right? So imagine I sent you an invoice, right, for like $50, right? And when you receive it, you see $500. Well, something's wrong there, right? Somewhere along the line, when I sent it to you, someone might have intercepted it and tampered with it and changed the numbers in there, right? So we want to see that something that I sent to you is un, unmodified, right? It's not modified, it's untampered with. So things like that, we use something like hashing algorithms to ensure that there is integrity of something, right? So what I would do is for that same invoice that I sent you, I could run it through a hashing algorithm, and it would output like a string of numbers and letters for me, right? So let's say I use an MD5 hash, right, which is sort of deprecated, but we use that for usually for things like trying to find the integrity of something, right? So it is a combination of 32 letters or 32 characters, hex characters. So it's 0 to 9 and A to F, right? And when I run it through, it gives me this unique sort of like a signature, if you will. And then when you receive it, you could also run the same algorithm, and then you will see if if that signature matches with each other. Then we know for sure it's the same thing. Any small little change to that particular document, any small change, right? One bit of change would completely change that hash. So it's very important
That's
for us.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I've heard the term hashing in the cryptocurrency world, although I know maybe they are not related and probably you're talking about something else, but that's how I kind of relate, because there's like hash codes and stuff in
Mhm.
cybersecurity in cryptocurrencies. But anyways, so cybersecurity in terms of the basics, most people relate to cybersecurity as, oh, my Facebook got hacked, right? This, you hear it a
Mhm.
lot. Or you'll see on Instagram, hey guys, please report this Instagram because it got hacked. So for the general public, for the people who are not so sophisticated when it comes to technology, when they hear cybersecurity, that's what they relate to. So for
Mhm.
that part, what are like the basic essential practices that we need to employ as normal individuals who use social media, a little bit of email, and we have our bank account and e-banking, right? So this is the basic general public thing. What are the like essential things that we need to employ to make sure we have the minimum amount of protection?
Sure. So I think I'm a very big advocate of MFA, multi-factor authentication, right? So if someone, because here's the thing, a lot of people don't have very strong passwords, right? Very weak passwords, very short. They try to do the bare minimum, and even if in the bare minimum they go according to a pattern that normally everyone uses, like a capital letter first, and then you have a bunch of little lowercase, and then we have a number or a symbol in the in the last part of the password. And so when they had these breaches, right? There's a person called Troy Hunt, right? He's a researcher, right? He owns the website Have I Been Pwned, right? You could check your passwords there. He has huge collections of passwords from different breaches. And what happens is that when they run research on it, they could see the different patterns that people have that when
What
they
was the
formulate their
website
password.
again?
Troy Hunt, Have I Been Pwned?
By Hunt?
Troy Hunt, Troy Hunt,
Why?
Hunt.
.com?
Well, just Google Troy Hunt and you'll see Have I Been Pwned as a website on there. And you could check your
Mm,
password to see if it's in any sort of database or any collection that is out there, or has it been used before. Or you can enter your
right.
email to see if any of your accounts are linked to that particular email to see if it's been compromised somewhere in one of the breaches, right? There's millions and millions of, or probably even in the billions, uh, of, of passwords and accounts being uh, breached, and it's in that database, and hackers have this information, right?
Hmm.
So what I'm leading up to is that if, because you have your passwords and it's being reused, someone can try to compromise different accounts just by having one password of yours. So it's very important that you have unique passwords and you have very strong passwords along with it. Now, we want to base ourselves based on something called the defense in depth strategy, right? So even if they do have our passwords, even if they do have access to it, like, or at least the credentials to it, they cannot go through another layer of security. For example, like an MFA, if you have like a Google Authenticator, or if you're like crazy security, not like me, you would have security keys like this, right? I have a bunch of these, right? I have a ton of these, and so what it does, that it's unphishable, right? The next layer for that, well, let me step back a little bit. Multi-factor authentication has different, they're not all equal, right? You have at the very bottom, you have SMS, right? This is your regular phone carrier. And what you do is that, you log into somewhere, you put in the correct password, and they send you a text message. And then you
Correct.
enter like a 6-digit code. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, right? So that's the bottom layer, the most insecure, because a hacker could take over your account, your phone account, what we call SIM jacking, right? They could just act as if it's your number, and they could receive text messages as if they were you, or they could even call up the carrier and say, hey, I'm switching to a new phone. I want you to recover this particular number to my phone, and they just take it over. And people at T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever, they don't they don't know. They just go ahead and do it, right? They just do minimal verification to do so. And so they could take over all your accounts that way, right? The next step is well, their next tier up is to try to use something like a Google Authenticator, right? Or actually before that, use something like a Google Voice, right? To compromise a Google Voice account, it's a lot more difficult than to compromise your regular carrier account, right? Because some accounts really ask you to or only allow you to use SMS as a multi-factor. They won't allow you anything else. So if that's the case, then you use a Google Voice SMS, right?
Mhm.
That's its next tier up apart
So
from
Google
the.
Voice, just to explain it to people, is basically a free mobile number that you can.
Mhm.
Is it free?
It's free. It's free.
Okay, so yeah, it's basically a mobile number that you get from Google Voice, which is a free service, and you could like it's just another number that's not associated with the typical carriers that you have.
Right. Right. And well, it's linked to your email account. So it's really important that you keep that particular email very secure, right? So it's linked to that.
Some people
Uh,
use different emails. Like
mhm.
they have like the regular email they interact with, and they have another email for Google Voice numbers, and they have another email for shopping and another. Is this something considered best practice, or is uh, too much?
Yes.
Too much.
No, no, this is good because I do that as well. I have so many different emails, right?
Mm.
It's sometimes it's hard to keep up with, but that's why I use a password manager, right? And I keep everything as a repository in there. So um, it's very important to compartmentalize. That's what we call it, right? You have shopping one side, you have banking one side, and then like for example, my banking email, I might use different emails for different banks too, even compartmentalize even more on a granular level. And what that does is that even if one gets compromised, you don't get compromised on all of them, right? If
Mm.
they try to recover your email, they would have access to that particular bank, for example, right? They just do like a forget password, and then your bank sends something to your email to recover your account, right? So if they compromise your email, you could almost be sure that they could compromise your bank account as well. So if you compartment those, it'll be much harder. So another layer on that, on okay, uh, my brain is going different directions. Let me just
No,
finish.
it's
Let me
my
just
bad
finish
because
off
I
the
interrupted you and I asked some probing questions. So we were talking about
MFA.
multi-factor
So
authentication. We
right.
mentioned first that the first layer would be SMS through your
Hmm.
phone carrier. The second layer using Google Voice number
Hmm.
with SMS, and
Hmm.
the layer three was the
Tier
Google
tier three.
Authenticator.
Tier. There are different tiers of
Here,
security,
yeah.
right? So
So
tier three would be something like a Google Authenticator or a Duo or a Authy, right? Something like that, right? You use something that would generate a code from your phone. It's a software token, right? And then the highest tier would be something like a security token, like the hardware security keys, like a UB key, right? So these are little keys. I'm sure you can see it there. But yeah, I have a bunch of these, and they use cryptography to authenticate rather than you entering a number. Because if you enter a number and someone tries to scam you or phish the number from you, they could say, "Oh, we're from whatever bank, and please give us the 6-digit number that you received on your phone." Well, you give it to them, you thinking that you're going to log into your account or whatever, right? So with
I almost fell for that. And let me tell you a story
go ahead.
that even I thought that I'm smart, like, you know, because people like, you think you know this stuff, like,
Hmm.
So I had this very good friend of mine. He's also a very reputable person, somebody I used to look up to. He's kind of a mentor. He's like an older figure, right? And I always enjoy the conversation with him. And he reached out to me once on Instagram, telling me that he's creating a WhatsApp group for smart people in the field, and he said that he want to add me to that group. So it's a very natural looking message. I welcomed it. Of course, I want to be part of that group. And he told me, well, you know what, we're gonna send you a code, and you're gonna have to send it back. And then I received a code from WhatsApp, and I'm like, I was almost about to send it, almost. But then something in my gut feeling told me, like, this is usually if I'm moving my WhatsApp to another number, this is the kind of
Hmm.
code I receive.
Hmm.
So I kind of took a moment there and decided to call him on his number. And sure enough, I called him and he told me, oh no, my Instagram got hacked.
Ooh.
And I was almost falling for it because it was done so well, and I'm sure that a lot of people, his friends on Instagram, has fallen for it because the way that this person impersonate him was so good. And I need really to advise people listening to this to really be careful for such attempts.
Yeah, social engineering. I mean, don't feel bad that you felt for it because we're all human, right? We have emotions. We have um, things that they could pull on, pull heartstrings on us, and we fall for stuff like that. Even people who are in this field for a long time, and when you have a really good social engineer, you're you could fall for something. Something looks very legit. You checked it out. It looks perfect, right? There's no flaws in it. And ChatGPT, for example, is aiding a lot of these type of phishing attacks, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, social engineering is going to get very much. It's a very big concern. It's going to get better and better. The scammers
So
know
back,
how to use this. Yeah, go ahead.
back to the essentials. So we're talking about SMS, Google Voice, authenticator apps, and
Hmm.
then the physical keys, the fancy little keys that you showed,
Hmm.
which very few percentage
Right.
of the people watching has them.
Yeah.
And then that's when it comes to multi-factor authentication, which means that accessing all of these services that require a password, we
Hmm.
recommend, or you recommend, adding another layer of multi-factor authentication using any of these tiers. Best is to go all the way up.
Right. Right.
But then you touched upon password managers. Could you talk more about that?
Sure, sure. So, password managers have become sort of a necessity today because we have so many accounts, right? We have so many emails, we have so many different accounts, and we can't. Our brain is not set up to remember all these things on a constant basis, right? We have to remember, example, 100 accounts, and then each one of those accounts is going to necessarily be a unique password. That becomes difficult, and that sort of pushes people towards finding an easy password or finding passwords that they could reuse, and that becomes a problem. That becomes why, like your friend, it could be that could be the reason that his Instagram account got hacked, right? Because they were trying different passwords and they're trying um, common passwords as well. People use password as a password, right? All lowercase password or password 123, right? And if we have time, we could show some password cracking on the show, right? So maybe later on in the show. Um, yeah, so having a password manager really helps you because you have everything organized there. I think one of our talks before we talked about password managers as well. Uh, Before we jump into that, we want to make sure we have an understanding of what a strong password entails, right? So length is better than complexity, and complexity is not a bad thing. It's just complexity adds to people forgetting their password, right? So we could resort into something that is like a passphrase, right? If you look at diceware.com, you could put it on the screen. Diceware, diceware.com, right? Diceware.com is a website that allows you to create a passphrase, right? You could choose 4 words, 5 words, 6 words, 7 words, and it will
Sorry,
just
Diceware. The where is, how do you spell it?
Diceware.
Oh,
So
okay.
diceware.com. So what that does is that you could create a password from that, right? It randomly picks words from a large dictionary, right? From like 7,776 words or something from the basic dictionary list. And what that does is that you get these 5 random words or 6 random words or whatever you put your settings, and that becomes your passphrase, right? You
Mm.
just dedicate your memory to that passphrase for that particular password. So it
But most,
becomes, yeah.
but
Go ahead.
most people, or most websites require not only words; they require like special characters and upper letters and numbers, and so Diceware also can generate something like that.
You could just add that to it, right? Which is so today's policies, or if certain companies or certain places when you log in and it forces you to use complexity, it is now
Mm.
considered a bad practice,
Mm.
it's a bad practice because for many reasons, right? One of the reasons is like I mentioned before, people forget the password is if it's too complex, right? If you mix in too many symbols, numbers, they forget. And then what that does is that you would have to have someone try to reset the password, or you call your help desk, or you email, or you're using resources unnecessarily, right? To try to recover the password. So it's better to have a longer password. So the recommended policy is to have a long allow for longer passwords and don't force complexity. Complexity is good, but don't force it on people, right?
Mm.
Allowing people to use symbols, allowing them to use numbers, but they don't have to. Because if you say, for example, you have to have a minimum password, 8 characters, you have to use symbols, you have to use uppercase, you have to use numbers. Like I said before, right? There's patterns to it. People do a minimum of an 8 character password. First letter is going to be capital letter, and they end with a number or a symbol, or symbol and number in the last part, right? Then as a hacker, you're like, okay, well, I could make it easy for myself, knowing exactly the patterns I use. I could launch an attack that is what we call a mask attack on Hashcat, and it directs that exact pattern, and it finds a lot of passwords easily, rather than trying to brute force it. Meaning, I would have to try every single combination in order to get that. So just by doing that pattern, I could get at least a certain percentage that are low hanging fruit, right?
Got it.
So having a longer password, you're no longer a low hanging fruit. You become a much harder target to hit.
Yep, that's great. So let me recap for people who are
Hmm.
joining right now. So we're talking about cybersecurity essentials for pretty much everyone else, everyone watching, and everyone, including myself. Like if I need to protect myself, I need first to make sure that I employ multi-factor authentication (MFA), and this is has multiple tiers. Tier one would be through the SMS through your normal phone carrier. Tier two is specific getting yourself a new Google Voice account or Google Voice number and start receiving these multi-factor code authenticators using that tier. And then another tier would be using the authenticator apps like Dio and Google Authenticator, which generates a code on your phone that you can use to do multi-factor authentication. And then if you want to take it up a notch, you could use a physical key that does encryption on your machine. So it's another layer of protection. And then you talked about the complexity and the length of the password, and you specified that the length of the password is very important. And you recommended a website called diceware.com, which allows you to generate different variety of random words together, and then you'll generate like a long password. And then finally, we talked about password managers, because to help you keep track of all these passwords on different websites. I personally use the Google Password Manager. Do you think Google Password Manager is any good, or should I go to another specified company?
Google is not bad. They are one of the top security oriented firms out there, right? Because they have something called the Google Project Zero and so on. They have a dedicated team for security. But I recommend you not using a browser based password manager, if that makes sense, right? If it says,
Mm.
oh, do you want to save the password to your browser? Your browser already is being busy with so many different things already. The team that is dedicated to trying to get your password manager on your browser is not specialized in that. Or maybe they have people who specialize in working on that, but use something that is specialized in password manager, like a Bitwarden, or a one pass or KeyPass. LastPass was pretty good until they got breached, right? And that becomes a problem. But I'm sure they cleaned up their act. But it's debatable whether or not you want to go with them. But I think for me, I think a password manager has to be open source, and Bitwarden fits that bill perfectly. And they're very open to a lot of these security audits, and they get security researchers that just try to test on that constantly, and they release these reports, and they're very good at doing that. So I would say Bitwarden is one of the top ones in my book, at least.
Okay, Danny. The thing is, and I'm sure that a lot of people watching will be just like me, feeling that, oh my God, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of inconvenience that I would have to go through to make sure that I'm secure. I understand that if I follow all of this, especially going all the way to the higher tiers, that I will be protected. I can feel that. I can know that this is like the best option. But also, my convenience in using the internet is also on stake here. So if I have to use multiple emails, multiple ways, if I have to insert my key everywhere, and all of this stuff is putting kind of a trouble on my experience of these services. So which leads me to the next question. Let's say if I am a college student, I have $200 in the bank, right? Like I have nothing basically to lose. So do I really have to invest all the way? Versus I am 60 years old or 70 years old and I got my retirement paycheck and I have all sorts of different tools out there. So is there a difference between someone who has very little to lose versus someone who's have a lot of money?
Right. So I think that becomes a fallacy sometimes. People are thinking, I don't have much to lose. What are going to take just $200 from me, right? So I think that becomes an issue of, okay. So let me step back a little bit too. Security is always a balance between convenience and security, right? You have these tugging on each other, and very rarely do they go together up, right? Maybe passwordless and pass keys is probably one of the exceptions, right? But it becomes a convenience issue because if it's too much friction, people are not going to go with it, right? Like you mentioned, why do I need to have so many emails? I have to use a password manager, blah blah blah, right? But think about people who are identity fraud, right? Identity theft. You get your identity stolen. Think about what they could do with that if they have your identity. They could apply loans in your name, right? So all of a sudden, you owe, I don't know, $50,000 for a car loan or something. What becomes of that then, right? Or even if it gets resolved and you don't lose you don't have to owe the $50,000. Your credit might be ruined for X amount of years, right? And when you apply for a loan later on down the line, your credit score is going to be affected, right? And we could talk about personal finance on another time as well, right? But having the different credit bureaus freeze your credit, right? Have those make it very hard for whoever wants to steal your identity. They'll just move on, right? If it's too hard for them, too much friction for them, they'll move on, right? But then there's nothing 100% in cybersecurity. You can be like Fort Knox, and someone somewhere is able to still get into your accounts if they're targeting you, right? If you're, say, for example, you're a politician or you're an activist, right? There's going to be ways, one way or another, they're going to be able to compromise you if they really want to compromise you. It's just a matter of how much resources they want to dedicate to compromising you. You being a low hanging fruit, they might just spend $25 and they still could be able to compromise you because the lower level hackers might be cheaper or they do like a huge um, economies of scale hacking, right? They just pray and spray, right? But if they're targeting you, those pray and spray may not be able to work if you're up on you're very secure, right? So they might have to spend $10,000, $100,000 to target you to be able to get to where you need to be compromised. So because I mentioned being a politician or a public figure or whatever, Google has something called the Advanced Protection Program, the APP, right? And those require that you use something called, the things I mentioned, the security keys. You have to have at least two of these. And the multi-factor doesn't allow you to use any other form of multi-factor. You can only use security keys as your multi-factor. So that's really, really secure. And then, of course, you have to pair it with a very strong password. It doesn't require that you have a very strong password, but it's good practice if at that level, it's good practice to have a strong password. So there's many other ramifications as well if you don't secure your account, right? Saying that you have nothing to lose is not an excuse for not taking better security, or doing better security, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great point. Great point. I think the identity theft part, people are could be easily vulnerable, especially young people. I
Mhm.
think the young people and the older generation are both vulnerable on the spectrum. The older, because they're not naturally tech savvy.
Mhm.
They are very trusting. You know, if you call your grandma or something, you know, you
Right,
feel
right.
that they are very trusting, and then the same could apply for the teenagers and the young generation who are reckless. They think everything's going to be okay, and they don't
Hmm.
secure themselves enough. So I think this message is for everyone, and you think that everyone should at least, you know, try or thrive to go up on the tier to make sure that yeah, so that they are protected. All right. So uh, what about like social media? I think you have something to say or to share about how people who share a lot of their lives on social media today and how vulnerable they can be.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect segment into that particular video I sent to you. Go ahead and play that, and let your audience take a look.
How did you send me?
I sent it to you maybe on
Yesterday.
WhatsApp, perhaps yesterday. Do you have the link?
Um,
If not, I could try to find it and then send it over to you.
Yeah, I think you sent it on the chat here yesterday,
Oh,
and
I
that's
see.
why I
Okay,
don't see it anymore.
let me go ahead and send that over. How would you like me to send it over? Through WhatsApp? Through,
Anything. I have everything
okay,
open right here.
go ahead and do it through maybe to the chat here.
So what we're going to be seeing is a video on how how your life, how sharing your life on social media could be potentially making you a target for these companies.
Let me know if that works.
Yeah, I got it. All right. So
Yeah,
What you got in your bag?
it's my new heels for graduation. Good morning, guys. Guess what day it is? It's my birthday. Huh? Where are these charges coming from?
Perfect. It sort of raises a little bit of awareness there, right?
absolutely, it's amazing.
Hmm.
So
With a credit card, let me just add a little bit to it. With a credit card, I'm not too concerned because you could just call up a credit card company. Hey, there's a fraudulent charge, and they take it off, right? Whatever, right? But with a debit card, you're on your own. If you have your debit card being stolen, or they used to make a purchase, it's your money. A credit card is a bank's money, right? They have resources to go and investigate. They have resources to go after the fraudsters, right? Because it's their money being used. But a debit card, it's your money. Are you going to spend resources to go and track down whoever spent that $100 from your account, right? You know, so pick and choose, right?
I feel there's a little bit of latency between the streams. So
Yeah.
maybe we should just try to disconnect and connect again. Could that
Sure.
work? Let me try to refresh my stream and see how it goes.
Okay.
All right. Let's hope that this is working now.
Okay. I also refreshed as well. So let me know if
Perfect.
my audio is good. All right. Good.
Yeah.
All right.
Look, nope, it's not working.
No. No.
For some reason, I still can hear my echo. All right. I think we covered most of the areas we want to cover. I
Hmm.
think we would have to leave the AI part and the quantum computing part to another session. And I
Sure.
want to book you as early as you can, Danny, for to talk about these interesting parts. But meantime, please feel free to tell the audience how they can contact you, and I'm sure gonna take all your contacts and put it in the YouTube description or the video description that we're gonna upload later on. But what are the other resources they could look at, and also what are your contact information if they want to seek your advice and your consultation on a one-to-one basis?
Right. I've done this for a number of people as well, especially older folks and younger people, where I would come in and help you sort of revamp your digital life and walk you through um, step by step how to secure different accounts, how to make yourself a much harder target for hackers. Right. Um, I understand a lot of the offensive side as well, and how to crack passwords, how to compromise, stuff like that. I wouldn't say I'm a top level expert, but at least I know how this is done. I've done it before in terms of in a practice environment, of course. But then knowing how to make yourself very secure is also knowing that you might have a little bit of inconvenience as well. Like we mentioned, there's a balance, right? It becomes what your risk appetite is, right? How secure do you want certain things? Maybe your bank account, you might want to have more security on there versus maybe some other things that are not as critical in your life, right? So I've done that before. You could feel free to book me. You could send a message to me on my LinkedIn. I'm sure you will have that on your YouTube description and so on. You could find me on Danny Chung, and you should be able to find me there. Um, I think it's Danny hyphen Chung is what you would find on the actual link. But I'll be sure to send that over to you, Naja. Right. Um, as for resources, there's just a ton of resources out there. You just know YouTube, for example. You could get into YouTube. You could search for how to secure your so on and so on, and there's a ton of information out there for you. Or ChatGPT. A lot of information on ChatGPT is pretty good.
Absolutely. Danny, we
Hmm.
have a question from Lori, or
Lord the
um,
Castle.
yes, and I put it on the screen, and you're welcome to answer it, please.
Right. So for fingerprint and retinal security, so there are biometrics, what we call biometrics, and that falls under the category of what we call something you are. Right. Also a form of MFA. It's also very good. It's gotten better as we go along because the technology has evolved, and what people do get confused is with the privacy issue of it, right? Thinking that, hey, they saved my fingerprint. But what actually happens is that your actual fingerprint is not being saved. It's just a mathematical representation of your fingerprint being saved. And knowing, because we have a very unique, because it's a fingerprint, it's very unique to you. And there's certain different points in the ridges and valleys that part gets saved, and that becomes knowing who you are, right? Something you are. Let's see. I don't know if I answered that question fully, but I hope I did. But the security, for the most part, on biometrics is pretty good. A lot of the pass keys and so on are moving towards using or basing off of that being your way of authenticating.
Yeah, again, we do apologize. We had other things to cover, but I think we're facing some sort of a technical issue with the Restream. We are hearing back our voices, and there's a little bit of latency. I'm not sure the people on the live are experiencing the same thing that we are. So if you're not, then great. But for us, it's very kind of annoying to hear our voices coming back at us. So that's why we're cutting this short until we have another session with Danny, which I promise I'm gonna work my best with Danny to get him on the show again. I think it's a very valuable session, very important, and I look forward to have him again on the show. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. And yeah, they're saying it sounds fine from their end.
It sounds fine on
So
my end too.
yeah.
If there's any other questions,
So yeah, if there's any other
I'm more than happy
questions,
to
and
answer
since
them.
it's sounding fine for you guys, yeah, we're happy to answer them. But if not, I think we have to fix our latency issue here first, and then we can have another session where we can talk about quantum computing and AI in cybersecurity. And until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot once again, Danny, and hope to see you again soon.